The evening was slowly settling over the small city, the sky painted with soft orange and pale purple shades. People were heading home with bags of groceries, parents were holding their children's hands, and street vendors were packing up after a long day of work. The world seemed peaceful for most, but not for everyone. Among busy footsteps and crowded sidewalks walked a young girl no older than 12. Her clothes were old, faded, and a little torn at the edges. Her shoes were worn out, barely holding together, but she kept walking without complaint. She had grown used to discomfort. Life had taught her to keep moving no matter how tired she felt. In her hands she carried something precious, a small trumpet, old and scratched, but clean and carefully wiped every day. It was maybe the only thing she owned, the only thing she could call hers. She was hungry. Not the kind of hunger that comes after skipping lunch, but the deep, painful hunger that stays for days, making her weak. Her stomach felt empty like a hollow drum. She had eaten only dry bread the day before, and that too was given by a kind old woman she met near a bus stop. Today she hoped for something better, maybe a bowl of rice, maybe warm soup, anything that could make her feel alive again. As she walked, she heard laughter from shops, smelled the warm spices from food stalls, and saw families sitting together eating large meals. Every smell of roasted meat, fresh bread, and butter sent a painful reminder through her body. Her mouth watered, but she forced herself not to think too much. She couldn't afford to wish for things she couldn't have, but today she hoped just a little. She reached a narrow street filled with lights that glowed warmly against the cold air. At the end of the street stood a small restaurant with wooden tables and bright windows. It wasn't fancy, but inside looked warm, safe, and welcoming. People were eating and talking. The sound of cutlery clinking felt almost like music. Her feet stopped moving the moment she smelled food drifting through the air: fresh bread, soup, grilled chicken, and something sweet like freshly baked pie. Her stomach twisted painfully, but her eyes shined with hope. She stood outside quietly, watching through the window like someone watching a dream. She saw children laughing with their parents, a couple sharing dessert, a man sipping hot tea. She imagined herself sitting at one of those tables, holding a warm meal with both hands, taking slow bites and tasting real food for the first time in days. She could almost feel the softness of bread, the warmth of soup sliding down her throat. But dreams were dreams, and she knew dreams didn't feed her. Still, she couldn't walk away. Something inside her told her to try. She looked down at the trumpet in her hand. It wasn't new or shiny, but she knew how to make it sing. She had learned from her father when life was kinder, before everything changed, before she was alone. Music was her last memory of happier days, and now it was her only chance at survival. She stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, gathering courage like gathering small stones in trembling hands. She was nervous. What if they laughed at her? What if they shouted and told her to leave? What if they ignored her altogether? But hunger gives a kind of bravery that fear can't defeat. She wiped dust off her trumpet gently and took a deep breath. If she didn't try today, she might not get another chance. Finally, she pushed the restaurant door open. A little bell rang as she entered, and a warm wave of air wrapped around her cold body. Her eyes blinked as she adjusted to the light. People noticed her, some glanced quickly, some looked a bit longer. She felt their eyes, but she kept her back straight, holding the trumpet close like it was a shield protecting her. She stepped forward slowly, heart beating fast, hands slightly shaking. She didn't want pity, she didn't want money. She only wanted a meal, just enough to take away the aching hunger. She reached the counter where the restaurant owner stood. He looked tired, wiping a plate with a cloth, probably after a long, tiring day. She opened her mouth, voice quiet like a small breeze. "Sir," she whispered, "if I play a song for you, could I have a meal?" There was silence for a moment. Her stomach growled softly, but she kept her eyes steady. She waited, hoping, praying that he would say yes. This small moment, standing in front of a stranger, hungry and hopeful, was the beginning of something she did not expect. The world around her was full of laughter and food, yet she stood there alone, holding only music and courage. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew she had tried. And sometimes, trying is where miracles begin. The girl stood at the counter, her small fingers gripping the trumpet a little tighter as she repeated her request in her mind. She had asked politely. She had spoken bravely. Now all she had to do was wait for the answer. But waiting is sometimes harder than speaking. The restaurant owner lifted his head slowly, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. He saw her torn clothes, her messy hair, the tiredness in her face. He saw a child who did not belong to this warm room filled with food and comfort. He frowned slightly, not out of cruelty but out of confusion. He had never been asked such a question before, especially not by a child holding an instrument older than she was. For a few seconds no one spoke. The sound of spoons and plates continued behind her. People were talking, laughing, chewing, living without worry, yet for her the world seemed to pause. Just one word from the man could change everything. Yes could fill her stomach. No could send her back into the cold streets again. Finally, the man let out a small laugh, not kind, not gentle, but the kind of laugh someone uses when they think something is unbelievable. He muttered under his breath, still amused, "A song for a meal, kids come up with anything these days." He didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he just laughed. The girl's heart fell a little. She had expected surprise, maybe even some doubt, but laughter hurt more than rejection. It made her feel small, it made her feel foolish for hoping. Still, she did not turn away. Hunger kept her standing like roots holding onto dry soil. One of the customers at a nearby table noticed the scene. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes leaned slightly forward, watching the little girl with curiosity. A man sipping coffee looked up too, eyebrows raised, unsure whether to smile or ignore the situation entirely. The girl could feel a tension gathering like slow-moving clouds, heavy and uncertain. The owner placed the plate he was cleaning on the counter and crossed his arms. He asked, half joking, half challenging, "You think one song is worth a meal? What can you even play on that old thing?" He pointed at the trumpet as though it was just a piece of shining junk. The girl swallowed. Her throat was dry. She looked down at the instrument, touched it softly as if it were a friend who never left her. Memories flashed in her mind, her father teaching her how to place her fingers, how to breathe gently, how to let music speak when words are too weak. She remembered practicing under a street lamp. She remembered playing for strangers who sometimes smiled, sometimes gave her coins, sometimes walked past as if she were invisible. Music had fed her before, maybe it could feed her again today. Slowly she raised her eyes to meet the owner's. There was no anger in her look, only determination wrapped in innocence. She didn't know how to argue, she didn't know how to convince him with fancy words, so she spoke with honesty, her voice soft but steady. "I don't have money," she said, "but I have music. It's the only thing I can give." Her words were simple, but they hit something inside the room like a soft knock on a closed door, not loud enough to demand, but gentle enough to be heard. The owner stared at her for a moment longer. Maybe he saw stubbornness. Maybe he saw bravery. Maybe he only saw a hungry child refusing to leave. He shook his head again, amused yet curious, and waved his hand lightly as if telling her to do whatever she wanted. It wasn't a yes, not exactly, but it also wasn't a refusal. It was permission, given casually without belief or expectation. People in the restaurant leaned slightly to watch what would happen. A spoon paused halfway to someone's mouth. A child stopped talking to listen. The girl could feel their eyes, but she didn't feel scared anymore. Something inside her settled like calm water after a storm. She lifted the trumpet to her lips. Her fingers found their positions like they remembered home. She closed her eyes not to escape but to feel. She breathed in deeply, filling her lungs with air and hope, then released her first note. It echoed softly through the restaurant, uncertain, trembling, like a voice that has forgotten how to speak. A few people exchanged looks, wondering if she could truly play. Her heart beat faster. She could have stopped. She could have run. But hunger kept her grounded, music kept her brave. She tried again. The second note was stronger, clearer, warmer, a sound with weight like a small light in a dark room slowly growing brighter. Conversations began to quiet down. Chairs stopped shifting. The air felt different. Something was happening, slow, delicate, unexpected. Her song had only begun. What the owner thought was just a child with an old trumpet was about to turn into something no one in that room would forget. The laughter was still echoing in her ears, but now she wanted to replace it not with anger, but with music so powerful that even the one who laughed would be left speechless. She didn't just want a meal anymore. She wanted to be heard. And as the next note rose, smooth and beautiful, the restaurant listened. The room was silent now, the echo of the girl's beautiful notes still hanging in the air like soft golden threads. No one was laughing anymore. No one was talking. All eyes were fixed on her, the small, hungry child with an old trumpet pressed close to her lips. And in that silence, something changed inside her. She was no longer just a girl asking for food. She was a performer, a storyteller. A voice the world could not ignore. She lowered the trumpet slowly after the last graceful note faded. Her heart was pounding fast, not from fear this time, but from the power she felt while playing. She took a tiny step back, unsure of what to expect. Her lips were slightly trembling, not knowing if applause or rejection would come. The owner blinked as if waking from a dream. His folded arms slowly dropped to his sides. A few customers exchanged surprised looks, and then all at once the restaurant filled with claps. Loud, genuine claps, people smiled, some even stood. A little boy sitting near the window bounced happily in his seat, clapping with both hands as if he had witnessed magic. But the owner did not clap. He was staring at her differently now. His eyes were not amused anymore, they were thoughtful, almost softened. He hadn't expected beauty. He expected noise, something childish, something that would prove his laughter right. Instead, she had given him something pure, something strong enough to quiet a room full of strangers. She looked at him nervously, waiting for a word, a sign, anything. But he just stared for a long moment, and she felt every second like a weight on her chest. Did he like it? Did he hate it? Would he send her away? Her courage began to shrink, little by little the longer he stayed silent. Finally he sighed, not heavy, not angry, but the kind of sigh that comes from being wrong. He leaned forward on the counter and spoke, his voice low but clear. "You play better than I expected." For her, those words were like sunlight breaking into a dark room. Not praise, maybe, but a door opening. She felt relief wash through her, warm and gentle. He continued, still studying her small hands holding the trumpet tightly. "Play one more song." Her mouth parted slightly, she didn't expect that. He wasn't laughing now. He wanted to listen, and that was bigger than a meal, bigger than pity. It was respect. She nodded slowly. She lifted her trumpet again, took a soft breath, and prepared to play. This time she didn't close her eyes. She looked around at the tables, the people, the lights, and she played not to prove herself, but to share something truthful, something from the deepest part of her heart. The second song was different from the first. This one was braver, clearer, full of hidden emotions she had never spoken. Her music carried the cold nights she slept outside, the long walks searching for food, the loss of her parents, the love she still held inside her like a little flame that refused to die. Every note was a story, every breath was a prayer. People were touched. A woman wiped her tears quietly with the edge of her scarf. A man who had been reading a newspaper put it down slowly, as if nothing on the page mattered more than the sound in the air. The little boy leaned forward, mesmerized, his eyes shining like stars. Even the owner, the man who had laughed, was now still, listening with a softness he didn't show before. The restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a small concert hall, and this hungry child was the center of the room. When she finished, the applause was louder than the first time. Some even whistled, cheering for her. She lowered her trumpet gently, her chest rising and falling from deep breaths. Her cheeks were slightly pink, her eyes glimmering with shy happiness. She felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt proud. The owner finally stepped out from behind the counter. He walked toward her slowly, as if thinking with every step. She stood still, gripping the trumpet, ready for anything. But when he reached her, he didn't scold her, didn't laugh, didn't tell her to leave. He placed his hand on her shoulder, not harsh, not heavy, just warm. "You earned a meal," he said. Her eyes widened. For a second she could not speak. Then, like a flower opening after a storm, her face softened into a small, grateful smile. She nodded gently, too overwhelmed for words. He led her to a table near the corner, one that was empty and quiet. A waiter soon placed a warm plate in front of her, bread, soup, vegetables, something sweet on the side. The smell alone felt like a blessing. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up a spoon. She took the first bite slowly. Warmth filled her mouth, then spread through her stomach like a gentle fire, melting the cold inside her. She closed her eyes for a moment, each bite a gift, each swallow a promise that she was still alive, still capable of turning pain into music. The owner watched her from afar, silent, thoughtful. He didn't know it yet, but this girl was not done changing minds. This was only the beginning, the moment she stood tall, not with words, but with music that demanded to be heard. She had asked for a meal. But what she earned was much more: respect. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm, but something in the atmosphere remained changed, softer, warmer, almost like a glow that couldn't be seen but could be felt. People were speaking again, but their voices carried a new tone, lighter, more gentle. Even their smiles looked different, as if the girls' music had loosened something inside their hearts. She sat at the corner table with her meal, slowly eating one spoonful at a time. She didn't rush, even though hunger begged her to. Every bite felt like a treasure. The soup's warmth traveled through her hands to her chest, and with each swallow she felt life returning to her body. The bread was soft, the vegetables tender, and the sweet dessert tasted like joy itself. She kept pausing between bites, closing her eyes as if she still couldn't believe the food was real. But while she ate, people kept watching her. Not with pity, but with respect, something rare, something she hadn't seen in many days. Mothers smiled softly, fathers nodded, children stared with wide curiosity. They didn't see a homeless child anymore. They saw a musician, a talent. A soul that refused to fade. The owner stood behind the counter, arms resting loosely, eyes still fixed on her though he pretended to be busy. He wiped a glass slower than necessary. He didn't understand why she stayed in his mind like a small echo that refused to leave. A little earlier, he had laughed at her. Now he felt that laugh return to him like a mistake he wished he could take back. He didn't say it out loud, but part of him felt ashamed. Not because she proved him wrong, but because she reminded him that people with nothing can still carry something priceless. When the girl finished eating, she sat quietly, hands folded around the warm bowl, eyes soaking in the last bits of comfort before she stepped back into the cold world outside. She didn't want to leave, but she didn't know if she was allowed to stay any longer. Meals were not meant to last forever, and dreams were not always given homes. She slowly placed her trumpet beside her on the table, tracing its worn edges with her fingers. This instrument had become her voice when life had taken away every other word. She wondered if music could keep her alive tomorrow too. Maybe today was just luck. Maybe tomorrow she would be hungry again. The thought made her small smile fade slightly. Just then, a hand rested gently on the table near her, not grabbing, not demanding, just present. She looked up and saw a woman standing there, the same lady who had watched her earlier with soft eyes. "You played beautifully," the woman said quietly, as if she didn't want to break the fragile calm around the girl. The girl nodded, too shy to answer back. Compliments felt new to her, strange but warm. Like sunlight on skin after many cloudy days, the woman placed a small coin pouch near the trumpet. "This is for your music," she added. "Buy yourself something warm tonight." The girl froze. She didn't expect money. She only wanted food. But kindness, when it arrives unexpectedly, feels even heavier than hunger. Her hands trembled as she took the pouch, whispering, "Thank you." Other customers approached too. One offered her gloves. Another handed her a small loaf of bread wrapped in a napkin. A teenager gave her a scarf from her own neck. None of them felt pity, they felt admiration. A gift, earned not by asking but by playing from the heart. But the moment that silenced everyone was when the restaurant owner finally walked toward her. He stopped beside her table, clearing his throat, as if searching for the right words. The room softened again, like everyone was waiting to hear what he would say. "You can come back," he murmured slowly. "If you want, play for us sometimes. I'll feed you whenever you do." Her eyes lifted instantly. Not wide like surprise, not bright like sudden excitement, but deep, filled with something heavier, gentler, hope, steady hope. The kind that doesn't burn fast and vanish, but glows quietly and stays. She nodded once carefully, as if saying yes too quickly might wake her from a dream. "I will come," she whispered, voice almost like her trumpet's softest note. The owner hesitated, then added something more, something he didn't plan to say. "You're talented more than you know, don't stop playing." Those words were small, but they planted roots inside her, deep and strong. Talent, he saw it. Others saw it. She was no longer invisible. The girl stood up from her chair, trumpet hugged close to her chest. She looked around at the people who were still watching her, and instead of lowering her eyes like she usually did, she lifted her chin slightly. She felt taller. Not in height, but in presence. She felt like someone who belonged somewhere. She walked toward the door slowly, taking in every detail, the lights, the sound of quiet conversation, the smell of warm food, as if storing it inside herself like memory to return to later. Just before stepping out, she turned back, looked at the owner, and gave a small smile, fragile but full of thanks. He didn't smile widely, but his eyes softened, a silent reply. Then she stepped outside. The night air was cold, but she didn't shiver. Warmth followed her, not on her skin, but inside her. She had music. She had food. She had the promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in a long time, she walked with her head held high. The restaurant door closed behind her gently, but the sound she left inside it, the music, stayed long after she was gone. The sky had grown darker by the time she stepped outside. Streetlights flickered like sleepy stars, casting long shadows on the pavement. But tonight, those shadows didn't feel frightening. She walked slowly, clutching the trumpet case close to her chest, her scarf and gloves warming her little hands. Every few steps she looked back at the glowing restaurant windows, a gentle smile rising on her lips. That place no longer felt unreachable or unfriendly. It felt like a door that had opened for her just a little, but enough to let light through. She walked past the stores, past the people still wandering, past the cold stone buildings. But her mind was not on the street anymore. It was still inside that restaurant, still hearing the applause, still seeing kind faces, still feeling the softness of bread melting on her tongue. For days she had lived with only struggle and silence, but tonight she carried something new, memory. A memory strong enough to fuel hope. She found an empty bench under a street lamp. The light above her buzzed quietly like a distant song. She sat down slowly, hugging her knees, trumpet resting safely beside her. She could have slept right there, but her eyes refused to close. Thoughts kept her awake, thoughts she never let herself think before. Thoughts like, maybe I can survive, maybe I can play again tomorrow, maybe music will feed me, maybe someone will hear me. She lifted the trumpet to her lips and played one soft note, only one, to the quiet night. It drifted through the empty street like a whisper of hope. She couldn't play loudly here, she didn't want to disturb anyone sleeping nearby. So she placed the instrument on her lap gently and looked at the sky instead. Clouds drifted slowly like wandering ships. She imagined herself floating among them, carried by music instead of wind. If sound had wings, she thought, maybe it could lift her out of hunger, out of loneliness, out of the cold. Maybe her father was somewhere above those clouds, listening to the notes she sent upward. As she thought of him, her eyes stung. Not with sadness alone, but with longing. She remembered sitting beside him when she was little, fingers too small to press trumpet keys properly, but trying anyway. He would laugh softly, guide her hands, and say, "Music speaks only when your heart speaks first." Tonight her heart had spoken loudly, louder than hunger, louder than doubt. A soft voice suddenly broke into her thoughts. "You're the girl from the restaurant, right? She turned quickly. A teenager stood beside her, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a backpack and holding a bicycle. His cheeks were red from the cold, breath visible in small white clouds. She nodded shyly. "I heard you play inside," he said, smiling. "You're amazing." She didn't know what to say, but her cheeks warmed. Compliments still felt like gifts she didn't know how to receive. The boy sat beside her on the bench, keeping distance as if not wanting to scare her. "Why are you out here alone?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Words were heavy when truth felt painful. Finally, she whispered, "I don't have a home." "What?" The boy looked down, silent for a moment. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Not every truth needs a big reaction. Sometimes quiet understanding is enough. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in paper. He offered it to her without a speech, without judgment, just a simple gesture of kindness. She stared at it. Just a simple gesture of kindness. She stared at it for a moment, not sure whether to accept, but his eyes were warm, honest. She nodded once and took it with both hands, saying a soft but deeply felt thank you. "No need to thank me," he replied. "You earned more than this with your music." They sat there together for a while, two strangers, connected not by words but by something softer, something invisible. He eventually stood, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "I hope you keep playing," he said. "Don't stop, you have something special." And then he left, riding slowly away, his bicycle wheels humming like a distant rhythm. She watched him disappear into the night, feeling less alone than she had in many winters. She ate the sandwich slowly, savoring it as she did with her meal earlier. Her stomach was full tonight, but more importantly, her heart was full too, not with food but with confidence. People believed in her now. Not just one person, many. And belief, she realized, feeds the soul more than bread feeds the body. A soft breeze moved through the street, rustling her hair. She closed her eyes and breathed it in, cold but gentle. Like the world had noticed her for the first time in a long time. She stood from the bench, picked up her trumpet and began walking again. Her steps felt steadier, like someone who had purpose. She didn't know where she would sleep tonight. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing with certainty: she would return to the restaurant. And next time, she wouldn't be just a hungry girl with a trumpet. She would be a performer, a musician, someone people listened to. Her music had changed one night, and from this night onward, her life was slowly changing too. Morning arrived slowly, the sky turning pale as night faded. The streets were still quiet, only a few cars passing, shop owners unlocking doors, sweeping sidewalks, preparing for a new day. The girl hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel tired. She walked with her trumpet hugged close to her chest, her mind replaying the applause from the restaurant like a song she didn't want to forget. The restaurant owner's words repeated softly in her head: "You earned a meal. Come back, don't stop playing." These sentences felt like a blanket she could wrap around her heart. For so long, no one had encouraged her, no one had told her she had value. But now she felt seen. She walked to the restaurant again, feeling nervous but excited. She wondered if they really meant it when they said she could return. What if the owner changed his mind? What if it was only kindness for one night and today things would be different? Fear walked beside her like a shadow, but hope held her hand and pulled her forward. When she reached the restaurant door, she paused. Through the window, she saw people eating breakfast, talking, laughing. A familiar scene, but today she wasn't an outsider peeking through glass. Today she was someone who had been welcomed before. She took a small breath and pushed the door open. The bell above the door chimed softly, the same sound as last night. A few customers glanced her way. Some recognized her instantly. Smiles appeared, small but real. That alone made her heart flutter with courage. Then she saw him, the owner, standing behind the counter preparing coffee. He looked up, met her eyes, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Her heart raced. She feared rejection, even though she tried to hide it. But then something unexpected happened. The owner nodded. Not a big gesture, not dramatic, just a simple nod of acknowledgement. A nod that said, "You may stay, you're welcome here." That one movement felt larger than any applause. He spoke with a calm voice, "You're back." She nodded too, holding her trumpet tighter. "Can I play again?" He didn't laugh this time, he didn't doubt her. He simply pointed toward the open space near the center of the room where customers could see and hear clearly. "Play whenever you're ready." Her body relaxed, relief washed through her like warm sunlight. She walked to the open space, placed her case on a chair, and lifted her trumpet with steady hands. People watched with expectation, not judgment. They wanted to hear her this time. She took a deep breath and began to play. The notes flowed smoother than yesterday, full and bright like morning light breaking through clouds. Her song was hopeful, cheerful, almost like laughter expressed through sound. People paused mid-breakfast, spoons halfway to their mouths, simply listening. Children smiled, feet swinging under their chairs. A waiter stopped to lean against the wall and enjoy the tune. Her music filled the room like fresh air entering through open windows. When she finished, the applause came again, louder, happier, fuller. This time, some people even placed money on her case. A few walked over to thank her in person. One elderly man said her music reminded him of his childhood. A young girl said it made her want to learn an instrument too. Every word felt like a gift. The restaurant owner approached slowly, but his steps carried respect now, not doubt. "You play with heart," he said, each word sincere. "You're welcome to perform here every morning if you want." Her eyes widened, shining like dew on grass. She wasn't just being fed, she was being offered a chance. A place, a purpose. She nodded eagerly, unable to hide her joy. "Thank you," she whispered. The owner walked back to the counter and returned not with just one meal but with two. One plate for now, one wrapped carefully for later. When he placed them in front of her, she didn't speak, she just stared, overwhelmed. No one had ever given her so much kindness at once. She sat down, ate slowly, and smiled between bites. Not just because of the food, but because she felt safe. She belonged somewhere, even if only for a little while. Word began to spread in the neighborhood. People told friends who told others. A little girl with a trumpet plays at the corner restaurant. Her music is pure, strong, unforgettable. Come hear her. More faces arrived the next day and the day after. Some came for breakfast, but many came for her. For the music that carried pain yet bloomed with hope. The restaurant, once just a place to eat, became something more, a place of story, of emotion, of sound that softened hearts. And at the center of it all stood the girl who once walked in just for a meal. Now she walked in for purpose. She no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt worthless. She no longer felt alone. She felt seen, heard, valued. Her trumpet had changed how people looked at her, but more importantly, it changed how she looked at herself. And in that restaurant, something fragile began to grow, respect, soft and steady. The same man who once laughed at her now waited for her music each morning. Her notes rewrote his judgment. Her courage rewrote her future. Days passed, then weeks. The coldness of winter still touched her skin, but she no longer felt fragile the way she once did. Each morning she returned to the same restaurant, not shyly, not uncertainly, but with quiet confidence. Customers now came early just to hear her play, some even waiting with warm smiles before she arrived. She was no longer just the little trumpet girl. She had become part of the place, like the chairs, the lights, the smell of fresh bread. She belonged there. Her music changed something inside the restaurant too. People spoke softer, listened more, stayed longer. The owner, once strict and impatient, began smiling more often. He'd stand behind the counter polishing glasses as she played, not because they needed polishing, but because listening made him feel calm. He no longer saw her as a stranger seeking food. He saw her as a reason his restaurant felt alive again. One morning, after she finished playing a gentle piece that floated through the room like warm morning sunlight, the applause was softer than usual, not because people didn't enjoy it, but because they were emotional. Her music had begun to touch deeper places inside hearts, memories, regrets, childhood dreams. Some listeners left with glistening eyes, hugging their loved ones just a little tighter. The girl packed her trumpet gently, as she did every day. But before she could leave, the owner came toward her with something unexpected. A black case, new, shiny, much nicer than her old worn one. She blinked in surprise, unsure if it was meant for her or for someone else. The man placed it in front of her carefully. "For you," he said. She stared, speechless. Her hands hovered above the case like she was touching something sacred. Slowly, she opened it. Inside lay a polished trumpet, gold bright, smooth, so new it reflected her face clearly. She gasped softly, breath shaking with disbelief. Her old trumpet had history, memory, love, but this one was opportunity. A future, a beginning. "I noticed yours was worn," the owner said quietly. "You deserve an instrument that matches your talent." She didn't cry often, life had pushed her to be strong, but now tears filled her eyes, soft and sparkling. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged him, a small, fragile hug from a child who received more than she ever dreamed. He hesitated only a moment before placing a gentle hand on her back. Someone who once laughed at her was now holding her like she mattered, like she was family. The customers clapped, not loudly, not cheerfully, but warmly, a kind of applause meant not for performance but for life. The girl held the new trumpet close to her heart, afraid to breathe too fast, afraid she might wake up and find it all gone. But it was real, all of it. Her music had fed her. Her bravery had earned respect. Her talent had built her a place in the world. There was one more surprise waiting that day. A man in a long coat approached when the crowd thinned. He introduced himself softly, a music teacher from a nearby academy. He had been visiting the restaurant for a few days, listening from the corner, waiting to be sure. He knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "If you want," he said gently, "I can teach you music properly. No fee, no requirement. Just your willingness to learn." The world paused. She looked down at her small fingers, now wrapped around a new trumpet, her future shining in metal. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I want to learn." The teacher smiled, and a new door opened, one bigger than any she could have imagined when she first walked into that restaurant, hungry and trembling. Sunlight filtered through the windows, catching dust in the air like tiny golden stars. She walked outside with her new trumpet, scarf wrapped around her neck, footsteps soft but full of direction. The same streets looked different now, brighter, kinder, because she was different. The girl who entered that restaurant seeking food walked out with purpose. Not just fed but lifted, not just noticed but valued, not just pitied but respected. Her hunger was not gone forever, life was still uncertain, but she now carried something stronger than hunger, hope. People often remember talent, but they never forget courage. And her courage, small, trembling but steady, changed everything. Her music didn't just earn her a meal, it earned her a future, a chance, a name, a place in people's hearts. And for the first time in her life, she walked forward not wondering if she would survive tomorrow, but excited to meet it. Because tomorrow she would play again. And the world now listening would hear her. Listening would hear her.